Okay, I think we'll begin. Marwan, is that okay if we begin, or do I need to hold on for one moment? 1, 2, 3. Oh, you're going to test it first? Okay, sorry, Marwan's going to go back to make sure the mics work. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? Do I have to keep talking? He's left the room, so I don't know if I need to keep speaking. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Are the mics working? Are the mics working, Marwan? Do you hear me? Of course, if they are working, our colleagues here who are watching online are going to hear this. So, Stefan gives me the thumbs up. Perfect. Okay, thanks. And we're good? Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we'll get started. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to all of you joining us on United Nations Web TV. You're joining the press conference for the opening of the 4th meeting of the subsidiary body of implementation of the Convention on Biological Diversity. We're here at UNON, the United Nations office in Nairobi, Kenya, for this meeting that begins today, the 21st of May, and will continue on for the next 8 days. I'm David Ainsworth. I'm the head of communications for the United Nations Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. And for today's press conference, I'm joined by the chair of this 4th meeting of the subsidiary body and implementation, Dr. Chira Achalenda Reddy of India. And I'm also joined by the acting executive secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, David Cooper. For this conference, both Dr. Reddy and Dr. Cooper will provide just a few brief remarks, and then we'll open up for questions to the journalists here in Nairobi. So the chair, you have the floor.
Dear members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, thanks to David for giving introductory remarks. The delegates from parties to Convention on Biological Diversity and observers organizations assembled here for a 9-day meeting where they will review the implementation of the convention and especially to advance the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which is also referred as the Biodiversity Plan. In fact, this is the first time that the subsidiary body on implementation is meeting after the COP15 held in December 2022. As we all know that the Biodiversity Plan is the world's most ambitious master plan to halt and reverse the biodiversity loss by 2030. It has a very clear and very comprehensive 23 action targets and 4 overarching goals that, if implemented, will take the world closer to living in harmony with nature by 2050. Delegates have come together at this subsidiary body and implementation. It's the 4th meeting of SBI at Nairobi to further develop mechanisms in support of the implementation of the biodiversity plan. How? That is through finance, capacity building, cooperation among countries and organizations, and also to monitor and review the progress of implementation. Let me outline a few key issues. Participants at SBI-4 will review the progress in alignment of national biodiversity strategy action plans of each party in alignment with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework so as to achieve the targets that are set in the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. The key issues are resource mobilization, capacity building, technical and scientific cooperation, communication, education, and public awareness, cooperation with other conventions and international organizations, review of the effectiveness of the Nagoya Protocol. They will also consider some other issues depending on the other priorities of the set out in the agenda of the SBI-4. I want to mention that there is one important committee, advisory committee on resource mobilization established by the parties, and it has submitted its report, and that will be discussed in the SBI-4. This is to bridge the gap finances required for implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. With this, and then this SBI-4, the recommendations will go to COP16, which is going to be held in the month of October, shortly in 2024 at Cali, Colombia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll now turn the floor over to the Acting Executive Secretary. David, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, David, and yeah, good to be here at this fourth meeting of SBI. So yes, at this meeting, what will parties do? What will governments and the other participants do? Firstly, review where we are in terms of the implementation at the national level of that ambitious framework that was agreed in COP15. This is an initial review, which will then be picked up again in Cali, Colombia, at COP16, and also at another session of this body, the subsidiary body on implementation, immediately prior to COP16. So when governments adopted this ambitious framework in Montreal in December 2022, they also asked countries to then translate those ambitious global targets, those ambitious global targets, into national targets, and to integrate those into national biodiversity strategy and action plans. And that's what countries are busy doing now. 8 countries have already completed that process, and the European Union has also developed a strategy, but most countries are still underway, and that's not surprising, given that this is quite a complex process. The Global Biodiversity Framework calls for a whole of government, whole of society approach. So all the ministries need to be involved, all the sectors need to be involved, all the different communities need to be engaged in that process. And then also we hope that in most countries the result will be not just a document but a policy instrument that's approved by the cabinet as a whole, the government as a whole, or even by the parliament. So this is quite an elaborate process. The parties in Montreal set a deadline of developing these national targets and, where possible, doing the full NBSAP update by the time of COP16 itself. Most countries are well underway with that process. The second thing this meeting is going to do is to further develop the mechanisms to support implementation of the biodiversity plan and to monitor progress in implementing the plan. So again, the main points of those mechanisms were already developed in Montreal, but there's some details that are still being worked out, and this body is trying to complete as much as possible of those. So both the mechanisms to support implementation and the mechanisms to monitor implementation. And then, if you like, the third sort of main group of things that will be done this week and next week in SBI-4 will be to look at how the convention works, let us say. So how to improve the effectiveness of the convention's own internal processes, and what updates may be needed to the program of work of the convention itself. So these are the main issues. Of course, we build also on this very successful meeting of the convention's other subsidiary body, this scientific body that took place last week. Substa 26 did a lot of work in updating the monitoring framework. This is the framework of indicators, and that, of course, is very much complementary to some of the things that are happening this week. Maybe just a note, aside of what's happening in the meeting room this week, we do also see a lot of momentum, out there. So one thing is the updating of the NBSAPs, what's happening in countries. Another are efforts to mobilize more financial resources. We're very happy that the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund was established actually within a few months of the request for it to be established, coming from, again, COP15 in Montreal. There were some good initial contributions to that fund, so there's over $230 million that have been contributed. Much more is needed, however, so we are looking for other donors to contribute to that fund. And actually, just in the last few days, now that fund, that fund became operational in February, but in the last few days, there's been a number of new grants awarded to allow some projects to be developed. So now, about $110 million has been committed to support projects in 24 countries around the world. And this includes the megadiverse, some of the megadiverse countries, it includes some of the least developed countries, it includes some of the small island developing states. Many of those projects also have a major component supporting activities of indigenous peoples and local communities. So this is good news. Of course, the GEF alone is not enough. There are broader targets that we're looking forward to achieve. One of the earliest targets to be achieved is to mobilize at least $20 billion in international finance by 2025, so next year. So a lot of work is still to be done to get to that target. So I just wanted to mention some of these other things that are happening, but then I'm ready to answer any questions together with our SBI chair. Thank you.
Yes, so many chairs, so many days. Great. Just mentioning it. Yes, I can share with you the GEF press release. They announced it was yesterday that there were 18 new projects, and as David said, I've got a figure of $70 million for 18 new projects in 21 countries. So that's significant as well. So we can follow up, which is great. Okay, we'll take questions now. So can you get a microphone in the room here? I know there are just a couple of people, but our SBI-4 chair hasn't met you yet, so you'll have to give your name first and indicate redirect your questions. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. I'm Stella Paul, and I report for Interpress Service, or IPS. It's a global news wire. And thank you, David. We have received the press release from GEF yesterday. But yeah, so my first question would be, Mr. Chair here. I was at the opening ceremony, and I had almost every group's spokesperson mentioning that how they did not get enough time to prepare for this meeting because the conference papers, the documents were uploaded or made available to them a bit late, and they were requesting a 6-week time frame for the future meetings. I just wanted to understand, why does this happen? And also, is this being underprepared going to affect the quality of discussion here in any way? I have more questions, but I'll stop with this one.
Yeah, the observation and the question raised by you is factual, but we have to see from a different context, in the sense that there are many intersessional workshops and heavy workload suddenly. We all know that COVID has disturbed the entire sequence of events, and even the COP itself could happen in two different COP 15.2, that is COP 15 held in Nairobi here itself. So this all accumulated workload has led to this thing. There is not, and the acting executive secretary has clearly mentioned that hereafter such things will not happen, and all the coming meetings, the documents will be published and posted within a given prescribed time limit. This sometimes, in every organization it happens because of the accumulated, workload from the past many years and months. So there is nothing, not that much. It will not affect. I feel personally, the parties and the delegates have to go through the documents a little bit of, they have to spend more time, not in a relaxed way, but they have to work hard to cope up with the little bit delay in the documents. So that is my understanding, and that is my opinion, please.
Thank you. A quick another question for you, sir, is you mentioned that there was a special advisory group on resource
Yeah.
mobilization. Is there a name for that group?
Yeah.
And the report that they have submitted, is that available for all to see? And does that report equally emphasize, or does that report include how to mobilize resources from both the public and the private sector?
It is called Advisory Committee on Resource Mobilization. And there are two co-chairs, Mr. Patrick from Brazil and Ms. Ines from Belgium. If I am wrong, please correct me. So there were several online meetings, about 4 for online meetings, and 2 physical, in-person meetings of all the experts. Thanks to Secretariat, they did a wonderful job, and they selected all the experts from different regions with having a gender balance and seeing the expertise and experience of the candidates, and they did a good exercise in selection and assembling this advisory committee on resource mobilization. They did consult, and they consulted many of the experts, and the collective knowledge, wisdom has been reflected in the report. Within the given constraints, how to mobilize both in public funds as well as you know, the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework first time emphasized on the importance of the private investments, private funding. So this has been dealt at length in the committee, and they have come out with some very good suggestions and solutions that will be further discussed, and it will be further in the COP, Conference of Parties is the governing body of the convention, and they will fine-tune it and they will finalize it. This is yet to be finalized by the COP. That is my understanding, please.
And maybe just to add, so there is indeed the report. It is available to all. And it also has some annexes. One of those is an update to the strategy for resource mobilization, an initial version of which was approved at COP15. So there's some updates to make sure it's aligned with what was adopted at COP15, because everything was happening at once in Montreal. And then there's also available a background study, if you like. It's called a study of the financial landscape that's relevant to the convention. So that is looking indeed at what opportunities there might be to increase public funding, both international and domestic, and private funding as well, and looking at also different funding approaches. So that document is also publicly available as well.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Joyce Chimbi. I am a reporter for Enterprise Service. I'm based here in Nairobi. So I have 2 questions to you, sir. And the first question is, apart from resources, challenges related to resources, what else do you see, what other challenges do you see standing in the way of the biodiversity plan? And the second question is, do you have any concerns that at the national level, the plan is not being domesticated ambitiously? Thank you.
There are some inherent issues when you compare across the parties. There are 196 parties. All are not having the same capabilities, same financial strength, especially from the technical point of view. See, we have a review of technical, scientific cooperation and all these aspects. Biodiversity is mainly the understanding the science and application of the scientific concepts. So therefore, the human resources also play a major role in implementation of the biodiversity plan. I mean to say that experts and subject matter specialists are also required. That is one aspect. Then the secondary aspect is that financial resources internally, domestic financial resources. Okay, that is the developing countries, underdeveloped and small island states, they expect some funding from the international organization and other developed countries. That is a fact. But internally also they have to strengthen certain aspects, and especially we have to encourage the private, there are different systems in different countries. For example, corporate social responsibility in India. So we have to tap such funds for the biodiversity conservation. So this plan, the entire 23 targets now are being operationalized by National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, followed by biodiversity finance plans. These two things will give us a clear picture of financial requirement, current budget, current expenditure, and what is the gap. So depending on the gap, the countries can try for the international funding and further make provision for the domestic funding and further expect from the funding from the developed countries in a multilateral way or bilateral manner. So this is how we have to move forward, and we need not feel pessimistic on this thing. We have to try and our best. Every country, every party should try its best. Thank you.
Maybe just to add, of course, there are constraints that countries face, and this body here is trying to address many of those. So obviously, financial resources, and we've talked about that. Dr. Reddy's talked about technical capacity. So what's been discussed this week is also how to have a system of technical and scientific centres and technical scientific cooperation among countries. Every country actually can learn something from other countries in terms of how to implement the plan, how to achieve these ambitious targets. And then there's also the issue of political will, right? And there's many dimensions to this. So sometimes that these issues are siloed, and so until recently, I think, too much expectation has perhaps been just on ministries of environment, conservation organizations, when we know that we need, as specified in the plan, of whole of government, whole of society approach. We need to engage all of the different sectors of the economy and of society. Political leaders face competing demands, right? And it's not easy. The targets and goals are ambitious, so major changes are needed. And, for that to happen, public opinion is really important. The role of the media is really important in highlighting how important it is that we do achieve these goals and targets. I think the good news is that we know that in most countries, actually, there is a majority of people who want to see more action, and this can enable leaders, politicians, to take more action. But the bad news is that the majority of people don't realize they're in a majority. They think they're in a minority, and that makes them less likely to act, and it means that politicians are less likely to take the risks, to have the bold policies, the bold actions that are needed to act. So we need to get the message across, right, that this is incredibly important, that people's future, if we're going to have a livable planet in future, we need to take urgent action on climate change, on biodiversity loss, on other aspects of this crisis. Bold action is needed for that.
Great, thank you very much. I think we have enough time for a couple more questions. We have a question over here. Can we pass the microphone back there? Thanks.
My name is Nancy Marangu. I represent an organization called Chemi Chemi Foundation. I am happy to learn how can technology deployment and absorption be harnessed within member states and parties to support the implementation of the targets. What are the opportunities? What might be the challenges? And what might be a win-win situation for all? Thank you.
If I understood correctly, you have mentioned that technology and the absorption or integration. I feel that we use mainly in the parlance of convention, we say mainstreaming of all these things. So that is the general, we use that word. So the mainstreaming of biodiversity into various sectors is really, is required. Otherwise, each sector, for example, agriculture is there. Then energy sector is there, animal husbandry is there, fisheries are there. So every sector, wherever it has an impact on biodiversity, they have to focus on mainstreaming of these concepts, these targets into their working. If they don't do it, there will be a biodiversity loss. So these are, as already mentioned by Acting Executive Secretary, that there I also mentioned two aspects are there. One is technology, scientific caliber, capable experts, subject matter experts, and there are other aspect is that finances. These two, as and when come up to the optimal level, then automatically the biodiversity will be mainstreamed and the biodiversity loss will be arrested. That is my understanding. Thank you.
So yeah, clearly technology and science has innovation has a big role to play. We see that so clearly in the climate change agenda, right, with innovation in the energy sector. Similarly, innovation is important to look at more efficient agriculture, for instance, but also to monitor progress on implementation as well. Certainly, developing countries face particular barriers in this respect, and I want to just look at this issue, for instance, of digital sequence information, where a lot of the genetic resources now are digitized and made available, so you don't need access to the tangible resource. You have access to the digitized genetic resources. That's a good thing, right? You can have access to that. But you can only really make use of it if you have the tools, the technologies to make use of it. And sometimes we see that developing countries don't have access to those tools, or that those tools are protected by intellectual property rights that they don't have access to, and issues like this. So actually, we do need to look at this issue of technology transfer as we go forward. And then just finally, I just want to mention that, of course, innovation isn't only about new technologies, but also about making use of everyone's knowledge, and in particular of the traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples, of local communities, of farmers. And we know that biodiversity conservation is particularly well managed by indigenous peoples, where they have control over their territories. And we also know that, people themselves are a great source of innovation, so we need to invest in people. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Can we pass the microphone to Stella? Otherwise they can't hear on web TV.
Sure. I mean, actually, back in Montreal in COP15, there's an extensive long-term strategy on capacity building and capacity development, and technical and scientific cooperation was adopted. So that plan is already in place, and that really needs to be implemented predominantly at the national level, subnational, but also perhaps regional level among countries. And in fact, the specific needs need to be expressed at those levels. So this this meeting isn't starting from scratch on this issue. It's really just filling in some gaps. So one of the other things that was decided at COP15 is that there would be a network of technical and scientific cooperation centres, regionally and sub-regionally. Over the past year and a half, there's been proposals developed for this network. Many referred to it this morning, and this week they're going to look also at how those can be coordinated globally. So how can we have a sort of coherent system of technical and scientific cooperation centres to support parties? And what will be important here is ways we can facilitate information sharing, technology sharing among countries, among institutions, in a way that all relevant institutions are engaged and involved. There will also be some discussions to review some updated program of work for the clearinghouse mechanism of the convention, which is the central mechanism of the convention for sharing information. So that's really the focus this week. It's just particular aspects of this problem.
Excellent, good. Well, thank you very much. Our chair and our acting executive secretary have other events to go to. Thank you for your time today. And we'll have another press conference on the 23rd of May by the CBD Women's Caucus. That'll be moving things forward. And of course, the closing press release. But also, I would be remiss not to point out that tomorrow, the 22nd of May, is the International Day for Biodiversity. And there'll be a celebration here in Nairobi as well as around the world. Just to note that Nairobi, this was the place that the final act, the final text of the convention was signed, and that was 32 years ago as of tomorrow. So, yeah. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful day.